As I was saying, it's the Charity Governance Simplified, one meeting, clear results on an effective board. So I'm going to be covering quite a lot of ground in this next hour. I'm going to be covering it because it's an area that I've been really interested in. I'll tell you a little bit about myself, first of all. My background really is in finance. So I used to be a career banker. I worked in corporate banking, commercial banking, lending, working with small businesses, that type of thing. I've worked for major banks, RBS, NatWest, Ulster Bank here, locally, Bank of Ireland. Did a little bit of work with the NAMA Bank as well in the Republic of Ireland. So really banking in my background, and I'm an accountant by profession. So the areas that I look after in terms of my business are financial management, particularly. So I work with small businesses on bookkeeping issues, on cash flow, bank lending, business plans, all that sort of thing. But I did take an interest in charity governance when I was approached to become a charity trustee. And probably in the old days, as they say, because we're obviously trying to move away from the tap on the shoulder type recruitment for trustees. We're trying to come to a position now where there's a bit more open recruitment for trustees, and trying to widen the net, if you like, to make sure that the appropriate trustees are recruited for boards. But anyway, I was approached by the CEO of a charity, and we had a chat, met with the chair informally, was asked to attend a couple of meetings, and I then joined the meetings for several months, and then the board agreed and I agreed that I would join the board. So that was how my journey into charities and the trustee world began. I will say that when I first joined, I really didn't have a huge clue about corporate governance. I didn't really know what it meant. I knew the broad terms. I knew it was all about looking after things and making sure everything was run well, etc. And there was an element of financial control and management in it. But I didn't know a huge amount about corporate governance. So I went on my own corporate governance journey, and I started to find out a little bit more about charity governance. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on. So I started to find out a little bit more about it and decide how. I realized how important it was, and I realized that I needed to start thinking about how I would begin to learn about it and then apply it to the organization, the charity that I was in. The charity I was in was a small to medium charity, and turnover at its peak about 1.2 million a year, and for most years probably around the 750 to 800,000, staff of about 12. So small to medium type charity, and I was as well as being a trustee, I was the chair of the finance subcommittee. As you would imagine, being an accountant, a senior accountant. So in terms of what we're going to be covering today, what I really want to emphasize to each of you is the key aspect of not just what governance is, but also how you apply it. So it's not just about what it is, because I've come across quite a few training courses and workshops and things, and they focus a lot on the role of the trustee, what the trustee's responsibilities are, the chair's responsibilities, and all that, and all really important. But when I started my journey, and when I look at what training is available now, I don't see a huge amount in terms of how people can apply all of the stuff that's out there to their own particular organization and assess and improve, review the governance that's in the organization. And I'm particularly interested in not just the governance aspect, but also breaking it down into key elements that bring about an effective board. So it's not just about being a compliant board, one with good governance, but actually being effective at what the board does. So what we want to be covering today is, what is charity governance? What is the framework for governance? So again, it's only an hour, so you're not going to walk away as an expert in governance, but you should walk away with a better knowledge, a better understanding of what governance is, and particularly the framework for governance, and how it is really important to get that right in your organization and your own particular role in it. Because I know we've got some CEOs registered for today, and I know we've got some trustees, chairs, so everybody may be with a different or slightly different angle on it, but all of it needs to come together to make it work for the charity, for the organisation itself. So I'm going to be looking at what is charity governance, what is the framework for the governance in terms of its key elements, the building blocks, how you can assess or improve your governance. We'll spend quite a bit of time on that. And I want to talk about the 5 steps approach. That's really one of the things I want you to take away from today. Just it's what I have pulled together in my time as a trustee and working with charities, because I also do some consultancy work with charities. And really, it's to try to give you a simple step-by-step approach that you can apply to your charity. And you can apply it in a way, it's a reasonably flexible 5 steps approach, but it'll allow you to address it and apply it to your particular charity. And I've talked a little bit about it already, but I will get into a little bit more detail just in terms of how good governance and effective boards are linked. So in my opinion, if you're an effective board, you probably have pretty good governance in place. And if you have pretty good governance in place, you're probably an effective board. I think the two go side by side. There will be an opportunity for Q&A at the end, so we'll aim to finish before 2 o'clock, so there'll be a chance for Q&A. If you do want to pop a question into the Q&A function here on your screen, or you want to pop something into the chat, or indeed if you want to share with anybody who's here today who you are and what you're doing, what your charity is all about, and what you're here for today, what you're trying to learn, then please do that as well. I do intend to leave the Q&A until the end. If there's anything really burning you up that's about what I say, and there's something you really need to ask a quick question about, then if you use the raise the hand function, then I'll stop. There's a small enough group of us today that I can do that, but I do intend to finish on time. Okay, so how is it focused? Those 3 bits are key elements of what we'll cover today, and the whole emphasis today is on simplifying it. So the whole purpose today is to simplify the process a little bit, so that you can take something from this and go and apply it to your organization. So I've done a little bit of training on charity governance, and when I do the face-to-face training, I usually start with asking everybody to write down their definition of charity governance or corporate governance. What do you think it is in 1 sentence? Because everybody sort of has an idea about what it is, but not everybody is very clear when it comes to describing that. So I do that as a little exercise with the trustees and senior management. I did an event recently for a group of credit unions. So there were managers, CEOs, and board members of credit unions. And it was on corporate governance in the credit union sector. And I asked them to do this exercise to write down in 1 sentence what they felt charity governance was. And I gave them 5 minutes to do it on their own. And when I went around them, there was one guy, and he was one of the first to put his hand up in terms of what he defined it as. And he came up with an absolutely fantastic definition of it. Normally people struggle a little bit with it to come up with compliance, and it's a bit of this, and it's about management, and it's about strategic planning, and all sorts of things. But basically, he came up with a perfect answer. And I said, fair play to you, not too many get that. And he says, well, I have to be honest. He says, I've got a phone in my hand, and I just Googled it. And so the answer he had was just straight off the internet. So he's the first person ever to come with a really clear definition of it. But he did cheat a little bit. We had a good laugh about it. But it was something that just broke the ice a little bit in terms of the session. But anyway, the definition that I usually refer to is this one here. Corporate governance is a system by which companies are directed and controlled. And that was a definition set up or written out by the Cadbury Committee in 1992. And if you take the word companies out of that and you put charities into it, you've got a fairly simple definition of what charity governance is. So it's really the system by which charities are directed and controlled. The word that I always think is missing from that is managed. So it's not about managing the charity, because that tends to be something that sits more closely with the staff, the management, the senior management in the charity. But basically that's a very simple definition, and it allows people to at least get it down into some single sentence. There's a lot more to it than that, which we're going to get into now and discuss. And that's the key. A lot of people see it as a complex area, which is why I've decided to go about doing a webinar like this. And it's so complicated because it is hard to define. It does cover a lot of ground. It covers things like strategy, compliance, finance, regulation, risk, integrity, openness, accountability, people, stakeholders, beneficiaries, a whole range of different things that are all that are all important in the context of a charity and how it operates. Trustees who are new to the board usually don't have a lot of board or governance experience. So they come in like I was when I went in. I had no previous experience in the board. So I was coming in quite cold, trying to understand what this was all about. And in fact, when I looked around the board and looked for other people to give me some direction on it, I found that many of them didn't really have a clue about what governance really meant. They were all keen on making sure things were done right and we had the right, our bank accounts were being reconciled, and we were out making sure that we were delivering our impacts and outputs and benefits, and we knew who we were working with, etc. But nobody really was able to get into a big definition of that. And also I found that, and we were a board like that, boards generally don't know where to start. They're often guided by the CEOs in terms of governance. So they look to the CEO for guidance in terms of what needs to be done, what's right and what's wrong. And that's partly a good thing. That the CEO is able to come in and bring in key and important aspects of running a charity properly. But there is a clear board responsibility for governance, and that's the key message I want you to take away today too. I just want to share this here. Now, this here is just an extract from the Charity Commission's website. This is the Charity Commission for England and Wales. So you can look it up yourself. Just go in and look at the site. They have a section where they look at the investigations or inquiries that they undertake. And that's an extract from one page that was on their website probably about 12 months ago now. But you can see on the left-hand side, they've got a little box there for an inquiry report, top left, inquiry opened, inquiry inquiry update, report, alert, case updates. So all those things are different little case studies, stories about what's going on in certain charities. And it's public information. So you can see there are named charities there in each of those boxes on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, that's an extract of a court case that was published on the Charity Commission website. And you can see there, it says the High Court of Justice ruled in favour of the Charity Commission following its decision to take legal action for restitution against the sole trustee of the Frank Wingate Cancer Relief Fund. So what they're talking about here is obviously a charity that was set up by a sole trustee, which is very unusual. We'll talk about the numbers of people who should be on a charity board. But a sole trustee, and he has been ordered by the High Court to repay £117,100.32p. Subject to recovery will be distributed by the Commission to local charities supporting the relief of cancer. So it follows a compliance case into the Frank Wingate Cancer Relief Fund, which he opened in 2017 to investigate concerns about the charity's management. So that second circle bit there, the charity came under scrutiny after its funds were misused to support the creation of a 210-foot, over 60 metres, Welsh Dragon statue as a tourist attraction. This project has no connection to advancing the charity's aims, and to date, no statue has been built. So I share that almost because it's almost comical if it wasn't for the fact that there are people behind this who would have donated funds to this for whatever reason. So this charity came under scrutiny. In June 2019, it goes on to say the Commission disqualified Mr Wingate, unsurprisingly, from acting as a trustee or senior manager of any charity in England and Wales for a period of 10 years, and has since pursued the restitution of funds. Do you know what? I have never looked up to see did he actually get the money back. I have my doubts as to whether that money ever was returned, or certainly all of it. But the point of sharing this is to explain what can happen when things go wrong. So when things go wrong in charities, it can be a very public experience, because the Charity Commission are not shy about naming people, naming charities, going into the detail of what goes on. There's lots of examples and case studies there of things where governance has gone wrong, where charity trustees have allowed conflicts of interest to interfere with their operations, etc. So it is something that if it goes wrong, it can be very public and very personal for individuals. So it is an important aspect, and that's why obviously each of you are here today, just to hear a little bit more about it. Just to explain, and this is part of the simplification process, just to give you an idea of what I believe are the key elements of a charity governance framework. So you've got the first and most important thing, which is the constitution. So each one of you who's in a charity will know what your constitution is. It's generally the memorandum and articles of association if you're a company registered with Companies House, and it's those are the basis on which the company and the organization was set up. There's also some details contained in the Charity Commission when you set yourself up as a registered charity, your public benefit requirements, what your objectives are. All that information is also relevant to your structure and what you are, but the constitution is key. I remember when I joined the charity board, actually, I didn't even know that we had a constitution. I knew about companies and I had a memorandum of an article of association, but I just wasn't aware that the charity was so driven by these documents. And so I made it a point of actually getting a copy of these here, and I actually brought the constitution with me to every single board meeting that I attended, just to make sure that I stayed focused in terms of making sure if we were discussing something, it was relevant to what the company, the charity that it was meant to be doing. So you've got the other things that are like general company law, because typically companies will be regulated as a limited company as well. So you're not only a trustee, but you're a director. You've got the regulators, you've got the charity commissions of England and Wales. You've got Charity Commission in Scotland, you've got Charity Commission in Northern Ireland, where I'm from, and you've got Charity Commission in the Republic of Ireland. So they've got all different charity commissions who all serve generally the same function. You've got key stakeholders that are important in terms of who your beneficiaries are, who your funders are, who your staff are, who your community stakeholders, all of that. And then you've got your charity's objectives and public benefit that I mentioned that are that's information that's registered with the Charity Commission. And then you've got your governance codes and principles. And we're going to spend quite a bit of time on the governance codes and principles, because that's key to be able to do something, key to being able to do something about your governance and making sure that you actually do something practical. So, and then layered across all of these elements of a framework are the board and staff. Okay, so you've got the board or committee, and you've got the staff. And I know not every charity has staff, so that's not always relevant. But where there are staff, they're a key element of managing the organization, running the organization, delivering its services and all of that, creating its impact and its outputs and all of that. So really important that's done. Sure, there's a question popped up there. I'll just see. Sorry, Nikki. Yes, I think I did cover it. I might have done it before you arrived, but yes, there will be. This is being recorded, so I do intend to make available a copy of this recording for anyone that wants it. I'm conscious myself that I don't always, if somebody sends me a copy of their slides or a copy of the presentation or a video or whatever, I don't always want it. But I will make it available for anyone that wants it. So what I will be doing with everybody is following up after this session, just a direct bit of communication with you, and I'll be giving you some additional details, which will include the option to request the link to the presentation. So you'll be able to get that. So thanks for asking that. Again, I thought I had mentioned at the start, but maybe not as clear as that. So I appreciate that. So yeah, I just want to, when I talk about the board and staff here, I just want to get into a little bit of detail, because there's quite often a little bit of confusion between the board's role and senior management's role or staff role. And in a very small charity where you might only have one or two members of staff, that can get even grayer. And you can get situations in small charities where the board are also volunteers with the charity. They also go in and go to events and do things in the charity. Maybe you can go into the office and do some office work, etc. So it gets a little bit grayer when you've got small charities. But at a senior level, for charities with staff, the board and senior management have different but overlapping functions. So it's worthwhile just a quick summary of what the board's specific responsibilities are. So the main one is strategic direction. So the board is there, going back to the original definition about, leading and making sure the charity is effectively run, etc. The key thing the board brings to a charity is they provide strategic direction to it. So basically they set the strategic direction being something that usually is over a 3 to 5 year time frame, and usually that's supported by a strategic plan. Now, I must say I've met maybe about 5 charities in the last 12 months through different roles and responsibilities that I have, and only 2 of them actually had a strategic plan. The other 3 didn't have one, and when I explained the importance of one. They said, yeah, well, I think we're okay without one. But anyway, it's not a legal requirement. It is still best practice to have a strategic plan. And therefore, strategic direction is a core responsibility of the board. Legal and financial oversight, as you'll see from that extract that I gave you earlier from the Charity Commission's website. The Charity Commission's website was, explaining where doing inquiries and updates and investigations, etc. And they require the trustees to have legal and financial oversight over the operations of the charity. Accountability, risk management, board effectiveness, they're all other key headline issues that are the responsibility of the board. With senior management, you've got these, which include operational management. So one of the clear distinctions between staff and the board are staff, operational management, the board, strategic management. So operational management, generally day-to-day stuff, getting contracts in place, managing staff, getting delivery of various services, speaking to stakeholders on the ground, all that type of thing. Strategy implementation as well. So if the board agrees a strategic plan and implements that in association with senior management, then the strategic plan would be very often the responsibility of the senior management to implement that, track it, record it, and report progress back to the board, who maintain oversight over that. So again, just a slight difference between responsibilities. Senior management responsibility for leadership within the organisation. And again, this can be a bit grey, because when we look into the governance aspects and the principles and codes of charity governance, you'll see that leadership is also a responsibility of the board. And it's important that the board takes responsibility for leadership of the organisation as well. So again, while I'm trying to be definitive about different responsibilities, in the real world, these do overlap a little bit. And senior management have a very clear responsibility in terms of reporting to the board, and reporting to the board regularly with updates in terms of finance, risk, operations, and all that's going on. So that's to give you an idea of the difference between the two, but also the fact that there's an overlap. But the key thing to remember is it's a partnership. This is governance and running a charity in any way and leading a charity. Neither the board nor senior management can do it on their own. They need to work together. And when I explain the how and the steps you need to take in terms of implementing good governance, you'll see that it's got to be something that's done jointly between staff where they exist and the board. Okay, so again, this is a key takeaway from today. I'm of the strong view that there's two ways, put it like this, to review governance, and put them side by side here. You've got a bit-by-bit approach, and you've got a holistic approach. So the bit-by-bit approach is where a board decides that they need to go and decide they need to set up some subcommittees, and they want to put up or organise some subcommittee terms of reference. Or they decide that they haven't got a risk management policy, and they want to set up a risk management policy, and they want to create a risk register, and they want to manage all that. So they do things as they come up. Or some trustee goes to a training session and here's somebody talking about codes of conduct, or here's them talking about financial reporting to the board, and think, we're not really doing that. Let's go and fix that up. So that's a bit by bit, or a piecemeal approach to sorting out governance. And there are times it's called for if it means that the organisation has identified a gap and it needs to fix something and maybe needs to address it quite quickly. And by all means, then it should be done in that way. But I'm an advocate of taking a holistic or a structured approach to governance. In other words, you don't just fix a bit here and a bit there. I don't know how any board could really know how good its governance is if they don't step back, see what the standards and principles are, and measure themselves or benchmark themselves against that. So I think it's really important that a board does that periodically, at least once every 3 years externally, and probably on a yearly basis they take some step back and say, what are we meant to be doing here on our board, and what are we actually doing, and are we doing everything right? So I'm definitely in the camp of having a holistic or structured approach to it. And then maybe as the year goes on, if little things pop up here and there that need to be done as well, they can be tackled. So a lot of what I'll be talking about is taking this holistic approach. So we've got people here from across the UK. We have some registered in Ireland, but I'm not sure if they've actually they're actually on the webinar today. But across the UK, I mentioned earlier, there are different governance codes. There's one in England and Wales for small charities, and there's one in England and Wales for large charities, defined as charities with turnover of over £1 million. You've got the charity governance code in Northern Ireland, Scotland, Republic. I'll just click on those actually, just so there is a link here. That's a charity governance code for England and Wales. You're probably familiar with it. And you'll see down the left-hand side that there are various principles. Organizational purpose, leadership, integrity, decision-making, risk control, board effectiveness, equality, diversity, inclusion, openness and accountability. So they're the 7 principles of the England and Wales Code. The 7 principles are the same for small and large charities. The emphasis is just on larger charities where it's more about having a senior management team, a CEO, where it's a bigger scale, more income, and maybe more international type work. So, but the principles, the 7 underlying principles are the same. So, we also have the Northern Ireland Code for those that are interested. Code of Good Governance, the 3rd edition is the latest. And again, they have, in this case, they have 5 principles. I'll go through each of these here, but just want to explain where they sit. They're all, I'm going to compare them all as well. Scottish Governance Code for the 3rd sector. Again, they have 6 principles. 5 organizational purpose, leadership, board behavior. Board behavior, they've combined a couple of things into that. But you can see that sort of the theme emerging: organizational purpose, leadership, control and risk management, effectiveness, and then the Republic of Ireland. It always does this: verifying that I'm a human. It usually says I am, so I'm just going to hope it does. And yep, we do have that. So Charity Governance Code for it, they have 6 principles. Purpose again, integrity, leading, control, effective, accountable, transparent. So what I'm explaining here is that while there are different codes, they are all very similar. 90% the same, very little difference between them. They have the same principles generally, and the way these work is, by and large, they aren't rules by which you must comply, but they do expect you to either apply these rules, principles, and codes to your charity or explain why you don't. So in other words, a little bit of flexibility there. If you say, well, there's a principle in there and there's something that they're saying a charity should do, but we're not going to do that because we believe our charity doesn't need to because A, B, and C. We're doing something else, or we've done that. So there's an element of being able to go in and not necessarily pick and choose, but explain, apply the principle or code, or explain why you don't. But there is an opportunity for each charity to apply these to your charity and decide if it's something you want to do or don't want to do. There's also a thing called the Nolan Principles, which you may have heard of. The Nolan Principles are more for the 7 principles of public life. So they relate to public life, and they are selflessness, integrity, objectivity, accountability again, openness again, honesty, leadership. So you can see there's a similarity here, but they're typically for anyone who works for the public office holder. I have seen in some charities' websites where they've actually say that they comply with these 7 principles of public life. So it's not strictly correct for charities, but then it's not 100% wrong either. So being able to apply these 7 principles to your charity is still a good way of demonstrating externally that you are applying good governance, and you've got some principles and codes by which you're working to. So what I've done here in this slide is on the 7 listed there under E and W, that's the 7 straight out of the England and Wales Small Charity Code. So, and along this little column here, or these columns, you've got the Scottish Code, the Northern Ireland Code, and the Republic of Ireland Code. So I've just put a little tick where each of these codes has a similar principle to the England and Wales Code. So you can see organisational purpose all the other three have a set of principles and that too, as do decision making, risk and control, or something similar to it, openness and accountability, integrity, board effectiveness. So they all sort of overlap with each other in terms of what they do. The Northern Ireland Code doesn't have one on leadership, but it has elements of leadership peppered throughout the 5 principles that it has. And the only one that doesn't have it in any of the other codes specifically is a principle on equality, diversity, and inclusion. So that is in the England and Wales Code, but it is not in the other 3. Now, they do have elements of equality, diversity, and inclusion built into their codes. And I suspect, because these tend to get revised every now and again, every 2 to 3 years, there's maybe they do a little bit of survey and a little bit of feedback and stuff, and they update their codes. I suspect the next versions of the Scottish, Northern Ireland, and Republic of Ireland ones will probably have a section on equality, diversity, and inclusion in them. So that's to give you an idea that while there are all these different codes, they're very similar. I wouldn't imagine that a charity governance set of principles in Scotland should be materially different England, Wales, or Northern Ireland, or the Republic of Ireland, or Australia, or New Zealand, or South Africa, or Indonesia, or the Philippines, or anywhere for that matter. The same principles should largely apply. Just a quick mention of the effective board situation here. So this here produces, an effective charity board produces desired results, outputs, and outcomes within a robust governance framework. Just a very short definition of what an effective charity board does. So effectiveness and good governance, which I mentioned earlier, are inextricably linked in my opinion. So what I'm saying here is that if you apply the principles of good governance to your organization, by default, you will ensure elements of board effectiveness will also come along with that, because effective boards will be doing things the way they should. Okay, we're now coming to the 5 steps. So this is something you may want to take away, and this is my own view of what it is that and how you can approach governance and tackle it in a way that's quite structured. So trying to simplify it down. So my first step that I'm recommending is you think about when you're going to do it. So why I say that first is because I meet some charity boards and they talk about doing governance in 2026 or sometime next year or before the end of the year or maybe the next quarter, because their agendas are packed with stuff and they say, we'll do it at some time. So I'm saying the very first step you should be thinking about, well, when are we going to do this? And what I've set down there is the word triggers. So typically it could be triggered by something like there's a new chair been appointed. There's a new CEO been appointed. There are 2 new trustees have been recruited and are starting at some time in Q2 2026 or Q1 2026 or within 2 months' time. And that could be a trigger for you to think about doing a governance review. So thinking about something that would make you say, we have 2 new trustees coming in. It would be good to get them in and get them to listen to the rest of us talking about where our governance is and to work with us to make sure that we've got everything right, because they'll bring an external view into the process. So when is the first step in it? Decide when you're going to do it, because too many trustees and charity boards collectively don't think about the when. We'll get around to it, or they say we don't need to do it because you know what, we're pretty good. We've got money in the bank. We've got great reserves, fantastic board. Our CEO is wonderful. We're not missing any targets. We've got great donors, and everything's we're really in a good shape. But that in each of those measures aren't necessarily sufficient to say that you benchmark adequately against the governance codes, which we'll talk a little bit about. You're then going to decide who. So who's going to do this? Is it going to be the full board, which I generally recommend, or is it going to be a subcommittee of the board? And generally, the subcommittee or the full board will work with senior management on it. So it'll be a key staff, the CEO or chief operating officer, or the senior management team, whatever, will collectively get together and do this. So it can be done by should be done by the full board generally, and it can be done by a subcommittee with support from senior management. But ultimately, the full board will take responsibility for it. It's not something a subcommittee would do on its own. It's something the subcommittee would simply do it on the board's behalf, but bring it to the board then after that. I've talked about that, what piecemeal or holistic. So I'm all in favour of the holistic approach rather than piecemeal. It's not for every board, but it should be for every board to think about that. At least have that as your default. And if you're not going to do a holistic one, then why not? Then it's the how. So how are you going to do this here? I'm going to talk about the three methods that you can do, that you can use to do a review of governance. So you've got a manual paper type system, you can use a consultant, or I'm going to share with you an online way of doing it as well. And all of this can be done through a one meeting approach. So this is about having a meeting which you sit down and say, we're going to review our governance. And that's what it's dedicated to. A little bit of prep, bit of planning involved in that there, but it's still possible to do that. And then you do it. So the 5 steps: when, who, what, how, and then do it. Just implement it. And when you've got all that done and you reviewed it, at some point in the future, you'll go back to it again and you'll do it again. In a year's time, 18 months' time, when the CEO leaves or a new one comes in or a new chair is appointed, let's go and refresh this because things change. Let's go and look at it again. So the 3 methods I've talked about, the manual or paper checklist, governance specialist, or online review. I've been through these 3, a little bit of a journey here. So the manual or paper checklist, which I'll share with you, I'll just show it actually now. That's the paper checklist, which you can get with English and Wales Charity Governance Code, and that's for smaller charities. That's just an extract of it, but you can get a paper checklist, and it tells you that you can go through it manually, getting a meeting arranged and getting everyone sitting around the table with a bit of paper and stuff. And I've been through that process and I found it quite onerous, complex, confusing, and more importantly, at the end of it, when it was done, trying to write up a report that made sense of 8 or 9 or 10 different people's views on different aspects of the governance code checklist. So it was a difficult process to do, but it is possible and it is free and it can be done that way. The second way is the governance specialist, a consultant, bringing them in. And that generally takes a structured approach like this, where they interview the chair, interview trustees, senior staff, they look at surveys, questionnaires, they document, they do a documentation review, look at policies, look at agenda, minutes, papers, look at the structure of all that. They look at the impact, the outcomes, all of that type of information to see how the charity is performing. They look at the strategy, have they got a plan, look at the culture within the organisation, the values, skills, and then they finally all end up with a board presentation and findings which they present. And that's basically the key. And then there's actions and oversight which the board then take forward. Now the problem with that is it takes a bit of money. So I did do that. I've done a couple of reviews now, and one I did, it was a 15-day review. £500 a day, cost the charity £7.5 grand. And it was that triggered me to say, look, the paper one's a bit onerous and time consuming and a little bit inefficient. The consultancy one is more efficient and detailed and you get an objective view, but it costs a lot of money. So there's something in the middle. So I'm going to now share with you an option that I've developed, and it's just an option if you want to think about an automated way of doing this here. So this is you can access it through my website, but this is really an online way to do a review of governance. So it's a health check and governance tool. I'm going to take a very, very quick run through this here now with you and show you how it works. But basically, when you sign into it, it gives you a set of instructions as to how it works. I'm not going to take you any way through that. A little bit of description and terminology of what people are and their roles, etc. But effectively, it's in a format like this. So you can see down the left-hand side, you've got 7 sections, which are cross-reference to the various charity governance codes. So we've got one on organizational purpose, one on leadership, board effectiveness, decision-making, risk control, and these other ones here. And the way this works is the board or a subcommittee with senior management would get together and they would collectively go through this here and they would collectively answer the questions to decide where they are against the codes and principles. Now, this goes into a little bit more detail than the governance codes because it brings in elements of effectiveness that I picked up from my time on the board. So in terms of how and when minutes should be issued and the structure of agendas and all that type of thing. So there's an extra element built into it as well as the governance thing. So it gives you an element of not just governance, but also board effectiveness. So I'm going to take you through this. What I've done here is I pre-prepared some of these answers. I've answered a lot of these questions. It's just a random, not based on any charity. So don't be thinking, I think I know what a charity is, because you don't. It isn't based on one. So in this first section, organizational purpose, there's 12 questions which are here, and you and the board would collectively go through and answer these questions. Some are a straight lift from the governance code, some are modified a little bit, and some have brought in effectiveness issues. So in this case here, question 1, has the board reviewed the governing document in the last 3 years to ensure its organisational purpose and activities are still relevant and valid to the external environment? That is a straight lift from the governance code, and you would answer yes or no to that. You and the board or the subcommittee would answer yes or no to that. So I've just gone through, have all board members been provided with a copy of the governing documents, what's expected of them? So you can see how it works. You have to answer all the questions. There are some that aren't relevant. This is like, does the organisation have a strategic plan that incorporates sustainability and clearly sets out how it's going to achieve its charitable purpose? So if you answer yes to that, you've got other questions here to answer about the plan. If you answer no to that, then these grey out. You don't have to answer those because they're about the plan. It talks about the impacts, the outputs. It talks about is the organisation meeting the public benefit requirement? Can all trustees explain this in simple terms? Yes, no, or in some cases, don't know. I don't know if every trustee could explain our public benefit in simple terms, but that is a requirement of the governance code. And there's a little bit of a charity commission regulation. I'll just take you through quickly because there's a few unanswered here. In section 2 on leadership, I'll just pick up the ones that are unanswered. So all board members, key post holders like the chair, vice chair, etc., secretary, treasurer have low profiles. If you say they don't, that greys out. If you say they do, then has the board formally reviewed them within the last 3 years to ensure they're still updated and relevant? No, let's just say no to that. And then does the board review it's about subsidiary companies? Does it have any subsidiary or associated companies? Most charities don't, so say no, but if it did have, there's a couple of more questions you can answer in there. Board effectiveness, there's 24 questions in that section. So you can see at a glance which sections aren't answered. The ones that are green, everything's been answered. The ones that are grey, some to answer still. So we've only one question to answer in this. Let's see where it is. So our clear board minutes issued on a timely basis within 7 to 14 days with responsibilities and dates for actions clearly assigned, all outstanding action points logged for follow-up. So that's an effectiveness issue that's been built into this. It's not necessarily a straight lift from the governance code, but it's a way that I found it was made our board very effective, getting minutes issued very quickly. Let's just say yes to that. And then finally, decision-making, risk and control. And there's questions in here about audit committees, subcommittees. Let's see, business plan. Let's see the question we haven't answered. And we are missed it up here. I'm sure somebody spotted it as I'm down through it. There it is there. Does the board set out and communicate the functions of subcommittees, officers, staff, and anyone else performing duties on its behalf? Let's just say yes. So there's also integrity questions, openness and accountability questions, and then there's equality, diversity, and inclusion questions. But when you answer the very last question for these sections, you get this little generate report button pops up. And when you hit generate report, you can download a report, save that, and you get an instant report and action plan for, it comes in this format here. So it has the name of the organization on it, and it comes up with instructions and guidance. So effectively, you've got 3 sections in the report. You've got key actions, you've got an Annex 1, you've got an Annex 2, and I explain what's in those. Some instructions about how it works. It also explains that if you are once you produce this report based on your own organization's responses and actions, you would be expected to produce evidence if you say, we've done that, we've got that in place, that's been done, that was approved last year. You would go in and put in reference to it, saying, oh, the board meeting of the 15th of June, 2024, will have details of that, where such a thing was approved and set in place, or the training that we did was done on the 5th of October last year, whatever. So there's a little bit of evidence that you would put into your report. I'll show you where that goes. But the report and action plan looks like this. So where you have answered questions, and these titles are slightly different. So this is an earlier version of the report, but you will get a set of actions under the first section, which was organizational purpose. And you will have your action that will tell you what you need to do. So provide a copy of the governing documents. We have said no to a question, you will have an action to go and do something about it. And in this version, you will have an opportunity to prioritize the action. You can decide if it's going to be a high, medium, or low priority, who's going to do it, when we're going to do it by, and you can provide a little, use this report as an updating system for the board as well, where you can show the current status of this here. So what this does, it gives you the 7 sections. You can then, you have all the specific actions that you and your board need to do. The board collectively will decide how to prioritize those, as in high, medium, or low, when they're going to be done by, and who's going to do them. So you get an option then to do each of the sections, and then at the end of these, you get your 2 annexes, and in Annex 1, where the answer was yes. So basically, you get a chance to refresh and say, well, we said we'll have that in place, and here is where you would put in your supporting evidence. You would say, we have that in place because we did that last June, or we've got a copy of a board minute that proves that that was agreed, whatever, in such a date. And you'd use then the right-hand side there for your supporting evidence. So that basically is how that would work. You can then go into, that's for each of the sections, you'll get that. And then for Annex 2, you will get a list of all the questions where the answer was no or don't know. So you get a comprehensive report that if a subcommittee of the board did it, you could bring this to the full board, and the full board members could look over it and say, I've looked at some of those questions where the subcommittee said, yes, we have that, and I don't think we have. So there's an element, an opportunity to challenge the organisation and those who completed it, and make sure that the board collectively signs off on this and approves it. So this is an option. So this is an option that's an alternative to a paper version, or a manual approach, or a bringing in a consultant. And it is an alternative to a piecemeal approach. We just do a little bit of something, fixing it up. This is a way to do it in a comprehensive way. So, sorry that didn't actually end up with the actual report from that thing, but that's neither here nor there. So let's go back into our presentation, and we just talk about it. Yeah, the board that I did it on, I did a manual exercise with the board. I developed this tool, and we did the electronic version with the board, and some of them said, saved so much time and resources, made it very easy, very good team exercise, best one I'd ever done. And one of the key things that, and others of you should have said, is that they didn't know what they didn't know about governance. So this prompted questions that they didn't even know they needed to think about in terms of governance. If anyone is interested in it, I will send out details after the webinar about it, and you get 12 months free unlimited access to it. Team exercise, a one-off fee, full money back guarantee. You're probably asking how much it is. I'll explain that in a moment. There's a free preview version available on my website. If you want to have a look at that, it allows you to get a look at one of the sections, see what the questions are like. There's also a short explainer video on the website if you're interested. And there's I'm offering everybody here today a one-to-one personalized live demo. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes if you want to have a session with you specifically, so you can ask questions yourself about it and apply it to your organization. So that's going to be an offer to anybody who wants it, if it's, because it's a little bit quick today, if it is something that you want to find out a little bit more about and see how it applies to your organization. It does retail sell for 695 quid, which is a standard price. Anyone who's on the webinar today, I'm happy to offer a £200 discount if somebody's interested. And again, you can wait until you get your one-to-one if that's something you're interested in. There's going to be a £200 off. It's up till the end of October. So you can see it's less than a day rate for a consultant, and it takes away all the paperwork and hard work of that. But not for everybody. Some people may decide they're just going to do it themselves and do paper, and that's absolutely fine, but that is an alternative. Okay, folks, we're very close to the end, 5 minutes left. I do want to leave a bit of time for questions. Just want to tell you, I'm going to do a few more webinars in the future. You may be interested in them, and I'm going to repeat this one in January. So I'm going to do it again in January. I'm going to see what the uptake is again, because I know there's a lot of people, not a lot, maybe, well, certainly more than half who were to come today and didn't, and maybe the January date might suit them better. I'm also going to be doing one on charity risk management, Simplified. I'm running that in December. I am also going to be doing one on charity financial management, Simplified. That date's yet to be confirmed. And I also going to be running ones of conflicts of interest, delegated authority in the charity board, and policy development and management. It's funny, I was approached by somebody yesterday to ask me would I be interested in providing the services to a board who they've got 10 policies that they said they just don't have time to update, and they would like somebody to do that for them. So and work with the board in getting their policies up to date. So policy development, that's why I added that one on, because policy development and management really critical for charities, making sure that they actually have the right policies in place, that they manage those policies correctly, that they update them on a regular basis, and that they make sure they're being implemented within the organisation, particularly things like safeguarding and health and safety and data protection, and all those things really critical for charities and making sure they're current and up to date. If you are interested in any of these webinars, you can get me, you'll probably get my details on LinkedIn, but if you go onto my website, which was there before, down at the bottom, you can sign up to a mailing list, and I will be issuing details on those webinars on the mailing list. So if somebody decides you like to know about them when they're coming up, then pop on my mailing list and I'll be able to keep you up to date on that. We're at the end, so last reminder here about the 5 steps approach. When is the first step? Making sure you get a date and a trigger as to why you want to do it then, but get that focused in terms of getting a date and getting people focused on it. Who's going to do it? What way are you going to do it? I recommend, as I said quite a few times, a holistic approach. How are you going to do it? Be it a manual, a consultant type approach, or an online. If you do it in one meeting, that review technique, online review technique, can be done in one meeting. Our board actually did it at the time in 2 meetings, simply because because it saves all the details, but it did it in 2 meetings because we did it at the end of an AGM, and because we were taking quite a bit of time over it, we left the last section of it and we completed that in the following board meeting. We just started the following board meeting off and did that, but we could have done it in one dedicated meeting, so it is possible to do that. And that's me. We're almost on time at 2 o'clock, and that's the end of the presentation. Thanks very much for everybody sticking with me on that.